Now, Australia loves its big utes and, more importantly, its big SUVs. We like the idea of being able to drive all around Australia at the drop of a hat. Go from your day job to all of a sudden needing to drive out to Uluru. And that's why I've got this. This is the 2021 Nissan Patrol TIL. It costs a smidge over $100,000 and it's known for being bulletproof, capable and fairly reliable. So I'm here to answer the question if this is worth saving $30,000 to buy this instead of going out and buying the top of the range Toyota Land Cruiser. With that, I'll have to check out some of its features and of course, take it for a drive. My name's Cameron, this is Product Review Cars, let's get into it. And so with this being the updated Nissan Patrol, most of those updates have gone to the exterior and mainly this front fascia, which looks fantastic. I really like the look of the exterior of the Patrol. Starting with the front, it's beefy, it's meaningful, and it just looks really aggressive. I especially love the new lights, they look fantastic. And overall, what you've got is a menacing looking off-roader. And I really think this is doing absolute justice to the Nissan Patrol name up front. Around the side, it can be mistaken for possibly a Toyota Land Cruiser at first glance, but then you sort of see the Nissan logos, these distinct wheels. I really like the wheel design on the TIL. It looks really good. And you've got some chrome pieces put everywhere. I'm not a huge fan of the chrome, but I do like the roof rails because you can obviously see that being loaded up with like a roof pod or a roof rack or even a camping tent up top. And then also there's plenty of wheel well space here. Although the weird thing that I saw up front is if you look through the wheel well, you can actually see the engine block. So if you're going through big puddles of mud or even going through the sand, that could end up touching the engine block through that gap in the wheel well, but I will leave it up to the Nissan engineers to hopefully mean that that engine will be fine when exposed to that sort of material all the time. And then around back, I think the rear styling does absolute justice for a V8 off-road monster like this one. It looks actually kind of sporty, and it's because this roof spoiler comes back. It feels really weird to be saying roof spoiler, but that's what this is. This is extending over the rear windshield and it looks quite nice. Wish they had hidden this up in here, would have made it look a lot cleaner. And yes, there's plenty of chrome across back with Patrol spelt out. And really what you have is a nice, tidy rear design that goes really well with the whole exterior design. So look, the exterior is fantastic and it looks really good for this generation. And if you're looking to tow, Nissan says you can tow up to about 3.5 ton total with the Nissan Patrol. So that's quite good. And then you've also got some chains hanging down here. Obviously those have been left over from previous tests. And then you've also got a little pin here so you can at least have a braked trailer going on with ease. So that's nice to see back here. Great Scott, we've gone back to the future. And it feels like we've gone back to the future because you're paying $100,000 for a brand new luxury off-roader in 2021. And you get an interior from about 2012. Now look, I'm just gonna start off by saying it's not a bad interior. I actually really quite like the interior of the Nissan Patrol. However, I would imagine if you're spending $100,000 on a car like this and you're cross-shopping between the competition or even considering going and spending your money on the brand new Land Cruiser, you might be in for a bit of a rude shock. And I say that because this interior isn't the new interior. If you've done some shopping online and checked out the brand new 2021 Nissan Patrol interior, you get a bit of a shock because it's not here. There's not a second screen. Instead, what you've got is a pretty much carryover from the last generation Patrol. And that's going to be the biggest complaint for a lot of customers, is the initial impression when you jump in here. If you've been in a previous generation Patrol and looking to upgrade, this will be a disappointment. Now we have lots of buttons and physical buttons at that too, which is actually something a lot of people miss on brand new cars. So it's nice to see that we have physical buttons here. So if you're wearing thick gloves, for example, you can still operate your infotainment and your media controls and your heated seats and your drive select modes and all that, and even your transmission. It's all very easily done wearing a pair of gloves because it's all physical buttons in here. And let me note the wood interior too. I love the wood trim. It looks quite good. There's nice and easy to read analog gauges, and look, plenty of places to store. There's even a cool glove box. This infotainment system is what's going to be the biggest letdown for a lot of people. It's kind of slow to react, but at least you do get a 360-degree top-down camera and plenty of reversing cameras and front cameras as well when you're parking, so it makes it a lot easier to guide yourself into a spot. And the navigation is relatively easy to use, but I would still prefer using my phone, which I probably would mount up on the vents next to the screen for navigation, which is a bit of a shame because I really would just prefer to use the infotainment here by plugging my phone into Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, which this car does not have. Now, plus when you go for the TIL models that you get Bose speakers put everywhere, and it does sound quite good, but it's not exactly super clear. Maybe some European alternatives at this price point would offer a bit more clarity in their speakers, but the Bose speaker system is still very good for pretty much any use you'll give it, which includes even watching movies in the back. Another thing as well with the interior is that it's built really well. There is no creaking, there's no rattling. Pretty much everything in here is really well built. So I could imagine over even a couple 100,000 kilometers of driving, we should hopefully see minimal creaks and rattles coming from up front. So that's part of the reason why you're saving $30,000, I guess, is because you're not getting the brand new and latest interior. And whether that's excusable for someone like you looking to buy this car in 2021, I'll leave that up to you. So far, it's been absolutely fine for me, but probably the absence of a digital speedo might be a bit of an issue when you've got a giant V8 under the bonnet. And then also the absence of being able to connect your phone via phone mirroring might be the two things that may irk a few people by making this usable. Now, what's going to be a big advantage for buying this vehicle over some alternatives would be how comfortable the rear passengers will be. And that's because we are well looked after in the back if we're traveling around for a long journey. Now, I really see this as being very ideal for 4 people, but if you must have 5 people and you still need the third row folded down, you're gonna be having an absolute good time back here. Because of how big this car is, I have so much space to recline. I also have plenty of knee room, and my feet have all right amount of room, but they don't really go underneath the seat like in some other cars. In this center console area, I have plenty of places to charge. There's 2 USBs here. I even have a 12-volt socket down the bottom, which is quite good. And I even have some ports to connect up to the rear entertainment. I'll get to that in a second. There's also controls for the rear air conditioning, so you can be nice and comfortable if you're out in 40-degree heat in the middle of Australia. And then there's also an ability to fold up the cooled glove box from the back. So if you have drinks stored in there, instead of having to reach over and distract the driver and the passenger, you can just press the button back here and it will fold open and you can just grab whatever's cooling in there, which is really cool and makes this for a very good long car journey sort of car. It's really, really good. So talking about these rear seat entertainments, you can use either the front CD player to play DVDs, but it's 2021 and I'm not too familiar with many people who still carry a pouch of DVDs, but if you do, you can watch them in the Patrol. You can plug in a USB device, so it could be something that can stream via USB, whether it might be even your phone or say even like an iPad, and so you can plug that in and feed a display to the back. But more importantly, what I thought was really cool is that you can connect up your laptop, which I'll do now, and by simply grabbing yourself an HDMI cord, you can plug yourself into the HDMI port back here. You take out your little pouch for the infotainment and you've got yourself a remote control which controls both screens. You just use the little toggle to go left and right. And then you can go and click on rear HDMI and we can open up our laptop and away we go. It instantly works as a second display. You can even extend your display depending on what laptop you're using to even make it a workable second screen if you have to do work on the move, which I think is really good. And I'm familiar with some people who take their kids out of school to go on a big trip around Australia, and that's what makes this really appealing. If the kids need to use a second screen to do some study or anything like that out on the move, or you need to do some office work while you're out and about, you can do that with the rear seat entertainment by hooking up a laptop. As for these headphones that come with the car, yeah, these are really, really cheap. They feel kind of gross to use, and look, they're very uncomfortable too. So I would say bring your own set of headphones to connect to your laptop if you need to not use the infotainment because other people are using it, because these are just going to hurt over a long period of time. But now this is a family car. We want to go check out what's happening in the back seats. Now, moving into the second row isn't really as easy as jumping into some other cars. You do have to get the kids to be able to fold the seat down like this. They do tumble forward automatically, which is quite nice. And you can get into the third row with relative ease. We have 2 seats in the back, and these headrests do go up nice and high, so an adult could sit back here, but I'm already hitting my head on the roof, so yeah, you don't really want to put anyone that you like all the way back here. This will be really good for maybe some kids to jump into the back, because obviously you can see here my knees are right up against the back of the seat here, and my feet have a little amount of space to move around in, so I kind of feel a little claustrophobic. And since you're looking at buying a gargantuan SUV like this one, using the automatic tailgate, you'll get to access 468 litres of boot space with the 3rd row folded up. Back here, you do have some little tie-down points which make this little tiny space actually quite usable and stops things rolling around. Now we do have this awkward sort of cover here. It's sort of loose and it's not on any hinges, it sort of just floats around here. I don't really love that, but there is some under storage here so you can hide small valuables, and below that we do see the bare metal of the car, but also a spare jack just in case you need it. So that's all quite good, but I would have expected a tiny bit more boot space because this is a giant car, but obviously you got to make room for the giant spare underneath. So I guess that's excused for how high this load floor is. By jumping in and folding the seats down the same way as how we got in the back, they tumble forwards, which is a great design, making it easy to get access to a total usable boot space of 2,623 litres. So now we're talking, we've got a massive car here. And if you're going away just with 2 people, you almost don't need to bring a trailer or a camping tent or anything like that. And so we have to talk about this motor. It's a 5.6 litre naturally aspirated V8 putting out 298 kilowatts and 560 newton meters of torque. It's a monster of a motor, and it's what makes the Patrol really special in 2021. No longer are cars getting fitted with motors like this anymore, and for good reason. We'll get to that in a second. But it is just an absolute treat to drive in a car that nearly weighs 3 ton. This weighs about 2.7 ton, and look, having this motor seems very adequate. I love this motor, and I was really looking forward to driving my first press car V8 this is the first time I've driven a press car V8 on product review cars. It's really, really good. I've driven V8s from other cars, and I have driven naturally aspirated ones. I've been very lucky to do so. And I've even driven some with forced induction like a supercharger or twin turbocharged. But in this instance, this is as natural as it gets with this sort of motor, and it's really what these old school off-roaders are all about. Big displacement, easy to run, and look, if anything was to go wrong with it while you're out in the outback, I can guarantee you that you'd be on your way a lot sooner than something with, say, a mild hybrid tech, a turbocharger, a supercharger, whatever. So it's nice to know that you have that simplicity and peace of mind when you're out on the open road. However, driving around town, this thing has 140 litres capacity in its fuel tank. It costs about $260 on average to fill up from empty. Like, I can't really comprehend that cost in a motor like this. That is like a car lease if you are driving this day to day. That is astronomical. And this thing is very popular in the UAE, and you quickly figure out why that is. Because if you have some sort of way to make a profit off selling oil, you'll like driving this. I've been driving around town, and my average fuel economy has been around 24 litres per 100 Ks. I've seen it spike as high as 27 litres per 100 Ks, and look, that is real world driving. That's traffic, that's up hills, that's parking. That is unfortunately the reality of having a spectacular motor like this one. And it's a really special unit as well, and it's just such a shame that it just costs so much to run. But if you're prepared to pay $30,000 less and use that towards keeping this thing running or upgrades or whatever you want to do, I would probably suggest using that money to keep this thing on the road, because that is a lot of money to fill up this motor, and that is its biggest crux. Everything else is just fine. Sure, it's a bit big, and we'll see how that impacts driving around town a little bit later. But really, unfortunately, that motor doesn't get all that economical when you are driving around town. Out on the highway, and even just coasting around, you don't see the needle rise above 1500 RPM all that much, which is the biggest advantage when driving a naturally aspirated V8. But the thing that gets away from you quickly is when you just have to get on the move, which you have to often. To get your big, nearly 3 ton SUV off the line, yeah, bit of an issue. On-road manners is quite interesting as well for the Patrol. It's got very loose steering, and that is not an understatement. It doesn't really tighten up like some other cars, it sort of stays loosey-goosey. And then also the suspension, it's nice and comfortable. I feel like I'm in a giant lounge chair, or like, you know, like a lazy boy or something like that, and I love it. And that's why I love having this big V8. It really fits with the character of this car being a big, comfortable, effortless machine. And through corners, because the V8's actually placed nice and low between the front wheels, it's not actually stacked up all that high, you actually get a respectable amounts of body roll through a corner, and you can actually point the car and tell it where you want it to go, and it should follow through relatively easily. However, you do notice all the body roll and tilt and movement that happens underneath you when driving this. Now, there's no driving modes to adjust that on the road. You only have on-road mode, that's it. And as much as I'd love to go out and properly test this off-road, unfortunately a little thing called lockdown is keeping me from taking it to our regular test track where I've taken all our cars past. Look, an $100,000 SUV like this is a luxury SUV, and this does have G-force meters in the instrument clusters, so Nissan does have a hint that people will like the V8 for its performance too. So it might appeal to some inner city dwellers who might have been driving Lexus LXs or any sort of big performance orientated luxury off-roader like those ones. As for the engine sound that you get from this when driving around town, unfortunately it's not really going to turn heads. It's very truck-like, and I'll give you an example of it. Let's bring the window down against this wall, shift it into manual mode, and look. Yeah, it's not all that exciting to listen to, and when you get going, it's... Ooh. Yeah, it's a V8 for sure, and it does sound really good, but more on the inside. When you take out all that induction wind noise that's happening on the outside, yeah, it doesn't really sound that great when you're putting the window down, so you can't really cruise around listening to your V8. But look, if you're buying this because you know what you're getting yourself into with a big off-roader, I'll even use the example of the Toyota Land Cruiser 70th edition that came out in the States. That thing sold out, and that thing's old school, and it does everything like it did in the past. Big V8, big comfortable interior that's sort of dated. And that's what this car is to me, except this doesn't have any anniversary stickers on it that would make it priced a lot more or would make it hold its value any better. It's just a normal Nissan Patrol. So that's what's kind of cool, is that you sort of get old school off-roader vibes and also like an experience, but without having to pay a premium to have that experience like you do now with many car brands. Like take cars like the 911R from Porsche. That thing sold for a premium because it was selling an experience that is no longer available in modern day cars. So that's what's really cool about this. And I think if you're prepared to pay the fuel bill and you're prepared to make the sacrifice for the lack of tech, say for the lack of ability for it to do a bit of self-driving in a lane. It does have radar cruise control, but I mean, it's not like Kia and Hyundai's tech, which allows you to steer and makes it a bit more comfortable on longer journeys. I think you've got yourself a really, really unique vehicle. And this is something that does also have a fantastic amount of road presence. The road presence this gives is really entertaining, and you do get heads that turn for this thing, and you get people asking you questions all the time about it just because of how cool it looks, and it really does have a certain presence that I think the Toyota Land Cruiser 200 series doesn't give. And now, should you buy one of these? Well, I think this appeals like a track car would, or a car that's sort of got some history to it, which this does. The reason why I say track car is because this thing is purpose built for off-roading, and it's super comfortable inside. This thing is really the best version of the classic off-roaders. It's really fine-tuned that whole notion of big motor, big comfort, and really capable and reliable. Until you can see Bush mechanics out in Alice Springs being able to do services on a Tesla Cybertruck, for example, you won't have to be worried about electric trucks taking over just yet. So the big V8 should hold its value in that regard. And if you're cross-shopping this between the Toyota Land Cruiser, you're really looking at just saving yourself about $30,000 to do whatever with, whether that's upgrades or filling this thing up with petrol. And there's a reason why these are really popular in the UAE, and it's because you do need a small oil refinery to be able to power this thing because of just how much this engine costs to run. So for day-to-day use, I don't think this thing would be a great option for a lot of people unless they really like the appeal of this car over, say, spending more on a Toyota Land Cruiser. And so with all that said, my name's Cameron, this is Product Review Cars, and I'll see you in the next one.